On the last episode of Menace, the Ken story, Ken got out of jail. He went straight to Rob's where he made some key discoveries. Hot Boy caught him up on everything that took place. Mac and Rob had made a break while Ken was gone, and Mac was working for his cousin Tony, Hitman Tony. Ken was all set to be the only cocaine dealer, and there was a new weed boy in town, Adrian, Ken's little brother Adrian. Ken found out that Adrian was Rob's nephew. By default, Celia was Rob's sister, and she was on crack. With that understanding, Ken started to wonder if Pops got Celia addicted to crack. Then he wondered if Rob got Ma addicted to get back at Pops. It all made him feel that he couldn't trust Rob. And in the end, Ken felt that everything was in upheaval. The only thing that felt consistent was his relationship with Shelonda, as usual. And now, Chapter 18. Preface. The plan. If I had $1 for every time things failed to go according to my plans, let's just say life would have gone much differently. I would be a millionaire. Ken. Chapter 18. The Plan. Narrated by Shandora Warren. Day 1. Fresh out of jail. I took a shower and a quick nap, and then I went to find her. Well, I didn't have to find her. Shelonda was at Sharon's apartment, exactly where she told me she'd be. It was crazy because everything was so controlled before that point in time. I had been sneaking phone calls, picking Shelonda up from her bus stop, having her skip school on Wednesdays, and sneaking in through her window. But on that day, I just knocked on the door. I knocked on the door, and Shelonda answered. Shelonda answered the door, and she greeted me with a kiss. It was intense, and happy, and free. She was free. I was able to pick Shelonda up that day and keep her for as long as I wanted her to stay. It was something new that we hadn't ever been able to do before, and I loved it. The only thing was, I had life otherwise. I had things to do that Shelonda knew nothing about. For that reason, I had to keep some distance between us. I couldn't let her get close enough to realize what was really going on. As far as she knew, my parents had left a bunch of money, and I was using that to pay the bills. I balanced spending time with Shelonda and hustling pretty easily. She didn't ask questions. She worked at the salon with Sharon during the day, and I'd squeeze in a couple of hours with her afterwards. She was probably too busy to notice anything either way. The flaw in the plan. The issue came when I decided to visit Shelonda one day. I was running around, so I didn't really have much time. I popped into Sharon's place to see her. I hadn't ever done that before. Usually, I'd just pick her up and we'd leave. But that day, I got a chance to see Shelonda in a different light, around some other people. Sharon had a boyfriend named Antonio, and he was there that day. He was an older dude, and I could tell that he was into some stuff. I knew his type. He kind of reminded me of Rob. The difference was, Antonio was a ladies' man. Shelonda would talk about how he was always bringing them food or paying for their stuff. Antonio had a couple of dudes that hung around him sometimes, and they popped in that day too. I watched everything. I watched Shelonda. She looked different in that environment. I don't know, she looked more mature. I saw the comfort that Shelonda had with Antonio. He asked if she wanted Chinese food, and Shelonda responded, "Yeah, order what you always get me." I thought to myself, what he always gets you? I had no idea what type of Chinese food Shelonda liked, but he did. Not only did he know what she wanted without her having to say, but he was willing to pay for it. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that he had his friends around her either. I didn't like them, and I didn't like him. A long time had passed since Kenny had been killed, and by that point, we knew who Tony was. Even still, I hated anybody named Anthony, Antonio, or anything else that could be broken down into Tony. I know that's petty, but I'm just being honest. Or maybe I just didn't like that guy. I knew types, and something about him just didn't sit well with me. I watched Sharon too. I watched the way Sharon spoke to Shelonda. She treated her like an adult, and I didn't like it. I mean, me and Shelonda did some adult things, but it was different. We were on the same level, and that evened things out. Okay, this is the thing. Sharon was older than Shelonda by a few years. She was maybe 22 or 23 at the time. Shelonda was like 17. I knew the relationship that they had because Shelonda had told me that Sharon was someone who she felt she could talk to and depend on. The other side of that was, I felt that Sharon was also probably someone who might have had some influence over Shelonda. That probably would have been fine if I felt like I would have benefited from the influence, but I wouldn't have. I could tell. I watched Sharon with Shelonda. I felt like she was trying to pull her into her world. Shelonda was naive. I wouldn't have been the least bit surprised if Sharon and Antonio were trying to hook her up with one of Antonio's friends. Nah, I wasn't going to let it go down like that. By that point, I had spent years waiting for our lives to catch up with each other's. Shelonda was finally free, and I didn't have to sneak around with her. The last thing I was going to do was lose her to one of them, so she couldn't be there. She had to come with me. Shelonda moved in with me in July, right after my birthday. It was good. It was everything that I ever imagined it would be with her. Shelonda made breakfast every morning. She worked at the salon with Sharon during the day, so I had time to handle my business without her even knowing it. When Shelonda came home, she made dinner. Sometimes I'd watch her. She'd smile and sing when she cooked. She was happy. We were genuinely happy together. Most nights, we stayed up together, just talking about life. We had plans. I felt like things were leveling out for us, like the details had finally aligned. Honestly, I had every intention of doing the right thing. My life just always had a way of messing itself up, just to spite me. It was August, and I had gotten a page from Rob. When I called him back, he told me that he needed to see me about something, and it was urgent. Shelonda had just started cooking. I told her I'd be right back because I thought I'd be right back. But when I got to Rob's, he told me that he needed me. Come to find out, he needed to see some people about a big deal, and he needed me to ride with him and Tommy. Mike had been in a little accident, so he couldn't go. By that point, Rob knew that I wasn't above using my hands. That being the case, he felt comfortable with me being with him in case something went down. I told Rob that I could ride with him, but it had to be quick. I got something else to do, I said. What he didn't tell me was the trip was 2 hours each way. By the time we drove there, did the deal, and got back, it was well after 11 o'clock. Shelonda had been waiting for me since like 5 o'clock. I was hot. The thing about Rob was, he always assumed that whatever he had going on was the most important thing. He never asked if I had something else to do. He just assumed that I should have jumped at the opportunity to be a part of it all. And when I mentioned that he was out of pocket for not letting me know how long we'd be gone, he laughed and said, "What else you got to do?" "Oh yeah, I heard you got company at the house now." I felt like it was time for me to lay it all out on the line. So I just put it out there. I said, "Hey, look, what I do here is the only business we got. Yeah, Shelonda lives at the house. It's not a secret. It's just none of your business. You are not my pops. And you ain't got nothing to do with my life after I leave here. Everybody else lets you run their lives. But I ain't about to do that. I respect you and your business, but you're going to have to respect mine too." Rob looked at me and said, "You think you grown, little man? Let me tell you something. You ain't doing nothing that a million other niggas ain't tried to do before you. I ain't trying to run your life. I'm just giving you some real life advice. I'm not saying you can't be with Shelonda. I'm just telling you that you got to be prepared for things to go another way. Let me tell you a story. I was out here in these streets, hustling dope. I met and fell in love with a woman, and I thought I could balance it all out too. The relationship ain't work out, but I stayed close to her. We still slept together here and there. I let her in because I trusted her. But women can't be trusted. They can't be trusted to be too close to this life. They're too emotional. She got mad because I wouldn't let her do what she wanted, and she started playing for the wrong side. She ain't here no more. Love will have you making some hard choices in regular life. But when you live like us, you got to understand that it could go much deeper. Don't talk to me about respect until you're forced to kill somebody you love, little man." I knew exactly who he was talking about. Hot Boy had told me enough about his life to the point where I understood that Rob had killed his mom. And maybe that should have been a warning to me. And in spite of the circumstances, maybe it should have made me understand that Rob was looking out. Somewhat. Instead, it infuriated me. I thought about the life that Hot Boy had lived without his mother, and I realized that Rob was to blame for it. I mean, I knew prior to that point. But hearing Rob confirm it made it real. I looked at Rob and said, "You a messed up nigga, Rob." Before I knew it, Rob ran up on me and grabbed me by my shirt. He was real close to my face. He said, "Don't you ever forget how you got here. I didn't ask for you. You came to me. The only reason I gave you a chance was because Kenny died, and your parents weren't worth nothing. You proving yourself, I give you that. But don't you ever think for 1 second that you're just going to be saying what you want to say to me. This is my show. Whoever don't want to play by my rules, they could find somewhere else to play. And I ain't talking about the girl either. When I say we ride, we ride. And if you don't like it, you could bounce." By that point, Tommy was walking back in. "What's going on?" he asked. "Little man just feeling himself," said Rob. I snatched my shirt away and started walking. I grabbed 2 beers from a cooler that was sitting beside the door. By the time I got outside, Hot Boy was on the porch. I was just mad. I said, "How you been putting up with that nigga all these years?" Hot Boy shook his head and said, "Rob is just Rob." By that point, it was after 12 o'clock. I went to my car and gulped down both of the beers, knowing that Shelonda was going to be mad when I got home. I was angry and frustrated. And for the first time in a while, I was sad. Rob had ripped open the wound. I only gave you a chance because Kenny had died, and your parents weren't worth nothing. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Kenny was dead. Ma and Pops were both in prison. Those were things that I had been too preoccupied to be sad over. But in the moment, all of it overwhelmed me. And for the second time in my life, I decided to snort cocaine. Yeah, of all things. I know, it sounds crazy. But I felt like it just got away from me the first time. I had just found out that Lorenzo had set Kenny up to get killed, and I had just watched Rob kill Lorenzo. I was an emotional mess. I felt like the situation was amplified because I got to Shelonda's house and her window was locked. I thought somebody was there and I just lost control. None of that was on the table that night. That night, I was just bothered over Rob's lack of care, and his words struck a nerve. I just wanted to forget for a minute. I thought I'd get high in this vibe. Besides, I kind of thought Shelonda would be asleep by the time I got home. Shelonda was not asleep, and it wasn't a vibe type of night. When I got home, Shelonda was mad. She was mad. She was screaming and asking where I'd been, talking about how I could have at least called. In theory, I knew she was right. But the other side of me, the part that was hyped up on cocaine, was over the feeling that I had to answer to everybody. Before I knew it, I just went off. I pushed Shelonda against the wall and grabbed her by her throat. For the first time, I let slip that I was making moves to take care of things. I slapped her and she fell on the floor. I remember straddling her and asking if she understood what I had to go through to provide for her. I said, as long as I'm paying the bills and taking care of things, don't ask me any questions. That's what I said to her. And in the moment, I meant it. I even felt justified in doing all of it. I was just angry and overwhelmed. I had to hustle to live, but I took care of Shelonda with no hesitation. I kept a roof over her head, paid all the bills, made sure she ate, clothed her, and everything else. She had a job at the salon, and I never let her spend a dime of her money. I hustled like a madman, but I respected her enough to keep her away from all of it. On the one occasion that life had gotten away from me, I had to come home to that. I already had to deal with Rob because she was there, and then I had to come home to that. I just needed not to see or hear her. I helped Shelonda off the floor and told her to go to bed. No harm done. Worst case scenario, she was just mad, but she'd get over it. But that wasn't the worst case. When I woke up the next morning, my clear head understood that the situation was much worse. I glanced over to a sleeping Shelonda. She was always beautiful to me. But that morning, she looked a mess. Her eyes were all puffy from where she had been crying, and there was an entire handprint around her neck. My handprint. I had done that to her. All of the justifications from the night before completely went out of the window. I felt terrible. I called Sharon and told her that Shelonda was sick and wouldn't be coming to work. There was no way that I was going to let her go around anybody looking like that. When Shelonda woke up, I told her that I had called and informed Sharon that she wouldn't be going into work. But because Sharon was acting suspicious, I had Shelonda call her too. I told her to get back into bed and I made her breakfast. I spent that day and the next days afterwards being at my very best. It wasn't an act. I did whatever I needed to do to make Shelonda see the truth. What I had done was a mistake. I had so many good things to give to her, and I didn't want to be judged by the times when I was at my worst. The cat was out of the bag, so I didn't hide the fact that I was hustling. We didn't talk about it, but I stopped selling that whole my parents left me money story. I wanted to take care of Shelonda. I asked her to quit the salon so I could do that 100%, and also to keep her away from Sharon's influence. I bought her a cell phone at a time when most people didn't really have them. She told me that she had been saving for a car, so I bought her one. It wasn't anything fancy. It was a basic little Nissan, but it was hers. I went out and made money. Then I came home to Shelonda. I was faithful to her. Our lives had finally aligned, and my plan was to spend every single day showing her how it could be. But plans. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Shenny Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to purchase books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Please like, follow, share this podcast with your friends, family, and frenemies, because all relationships matter, even the toxic ones. Thank you so much for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.